Alright, so I'm back with yet another quick Pauper deck tech. So I thought I would just show the latest version of my 6-land Spy Golgari combo deck. So this version, like the old one, runs 6 lands in the deck, all of which are forests and all of which are snow lands. Meaning that we can search for them with cards like Land Grant, Nature's Law, and 3 Visits. So I'll quickly just mention sort of the game plan here. So we're a combo deck that wins the game with Balustrade Spy. We have 6 lands in our deck. So phase 1 is to get all of the lands out of our library. So we tutor for them using effects like Generous Ent, Troll of Khazad-dûm, Timberland Ancient, and our various land searching sorceries. So step 1 is you remove all of your lands out of your library. Step 2 is you cast Balustrade Spy, which is 4 for a 2/3 with flying. It says when it enters the battlefield, target player reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a land, then puts all those revealed cards into their graveyard. We play this targeting ourselves. We have no lands in our library, which will cause us to mill our entire library, thus, automatically placing all of the cards in our deck into our graveyard. From there, we can use all sorts of shenanigans to win the game. At the moment, the principal way of winning the game once you've milled your entire library is to unearth 2 copies of Dregscape Zombie. It's 2 mana for a 2/1 with an unearth cost of 1 black. So if you pay 1 black while it's in your graveyard, you can return it from your graveyard to the battlefield with haste. We return 2 of these, meaning that we now have 2 Dregscape Zombies on the battlefield and 1 Balustrade Spy on the battlefield. That means we have at least 3 creatures on the battlefield. Then we sacrifice those creatures to flashback Dread Return, which says return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. The creature we return is Lotleth Giant, which is 7 mana for a 6/5 that says when it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target opponent for each creature card in your graveyard. Our entire library will be in our graveyard, so we're guaranteed to have over 20 cards in the graveyard as long as they haven't disrupted us. Meaning that this will automatically deal enough damage to kill the opponent. So what's pretty nice about this is that this is technically not a combo because it only requires 1 card. Once all 6 of our forests are out of our deck, then the gun is loaded. It means that as soon as we draw the Balustrade Spy and successfully resolve it, we are guaranteed to mill our entire library, and then if our opponent has no way of stopping us, we will kill them. So it's quite nice that you don't need Balustrade Spy and Songs of the Damned, or whatever other combo piece you have. You just need the Spy. Then we're also pretty consistent about getting the Spy, because we run 4 copies of it, along with 4 copies of Dimir House Guard, which is 4 for a 2/3 with Fear. But the main reason that we play it is because it has Transmute for a cost of 3, so you can pay 3, discard this, search your library for a card with the same mana value, and put it into your hand, and it has the same mana value as Balustrade Spy. And also Dread Return, not that that will often be relevant, but this just lets us tutor for the Balustrade Spy, meaning we're even more likely to get it into our hand quickly. Then the rest of the deck is essentially just a bit of mana ramp and just tons of ways of tutoring for the lands in our deck. So first up, in our 1-drop slot, we have Abundant Harvest, which is 1 green for a sorcery. It says choose land or non-land, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card of the chosen kind, put that card into your hand, and the rest on the bottom in a random order. So what's nice about this is that in the late game, once we've got all of the lands out of our library, which we do pretty fast and pretty consistently, given all of the land tutoring that we run, this doesn't become totally useless because we can just cast it and choose non-land, which will just simply cantrip us and draw us a card. I mean, that's not great, but at least it's not utterly useless, like some of the other land searching effects. We're running 4 copies of Llanowar Elves just for a bit of a ramp. Then one of the best land tutoring effects in the deck is Land Grant, which is 2 mana for a sorcery. It says search your library for a forest and put it into your hand. But the really great thing about it that makes it perfect for a deck with such a low land count is that it has an alternate cost, which it says if you have no lands in your hand, you may reveal your hand instead of paying Land Grant's mana cost. So this becomes a 0 mana forest tutoring spell, provided we have no lands in our hand, which, given that we run 6 lands in the entire deck, we're usually going to have no lands in the hand. So this is great for getting us going, getting us started with our mana. And then once we have 1 mana, we can kind of chain off that and cast more land searching effects to tutor up the rest of the lands in our deck. And then those land tutoring effects, the best ones basically that we have in the sorcery slot, are 3 Visits and Nature's Law, which are essentially the same thing. They're 2 mana for a sorcery that says search your library for a forest and put it onto the battlefield. Now note here that it doesn't say put it onto the battlefield tapped, so we can search for our basic forests and then tap them for mana the same turn, which is really great. And as I mentioned, every land in our deck is a forest, including Woodland Chasm, which is a snow swamp forest. Okay, then in terms of our other land searching effects, we have 4 copies of Generous Ent, we have 4 copies of Troll of Khazad-dûm, and we have 4 copies of Timberland Ancient, which is 6 mana for a 6/5 with Reach and Trample, and it has Forest Cycling for a cost of 2. So as you can see, we are running 12 creatures with land cycling effects. For that reason, this latest version of the deck, the main difference from this in this version relative to the older versions is the fact that we are now running 4 copies of Exhume as essentially an alternate strategy, an alternate game plan, an alternate way of presenting an early threat to our opponents while we are tutoring the lands out of our deck and working toward our Balustrade Spy combo, is that we instead just try to exhume our cycling creatures as early as possible. I mean, it's not uncommon that we go turn 1, cycle a troll, turn 2, exhume the troll. So that presents sort of an early threat for your opponent to deal with. And also one thing I've noticed in testing is that game 2, your opponent will side in Graveyard Hate against you, obviously. But then the fact that we now have multiple powerful plays utilizing the graveyard kind of puts your opponent into an awkward position of, if they have a Relic of Progenitus on the battlefield, do they activate and sack the Relic of Progenitus when we cast Exhume to stop us from reanimating a threat, or do they let us reanimate the threat and hold onto that relic for when we potentially cast Balustrade Spy? So it kind of presents a bit of a dilemma for the opponent, the fact that we are now running multiple ways of using the graveyard to our advantage. And this also gives us a backup quick game plan rather than relying purely on the combo kill. And then finally, our third game plan is just to hardcast our threats. That's one perk of running a deck where basically a lot of our utility creatures, utility cards, I should say, like our 12 land searching effects, our 4 transmute cards, these are all creatures, meaning that we can just hardcast them, and they're pretty aggressive bodies. I mean, 6/5 Triple Menace, 6/5 Reach Trample, 5/7 Reach, 2/3 Fear, it's evasive. Lotleth Giant, 7 mana for a 6/5 that deals damage when it ETBs, although we do need a Llanowar Elves to cast it since we only run 6 lands. And then finally, the rest of the last 4 slots in the deck are also made up with yet more just aggressive, heavy hitting creatures. So we have 2 copies of Gurmag Angler, and we have two copies of Avenging Hunter, 5 for a 5/4 trample. When it enters, you take the initiative. And then this is also great because the first effect of taking the initiative is that you search for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped, I believe, or is it into your hand? I forget in the moment, but it's kind of irrelevant because either way, we're tutoring lands out of our deck. So Avenging Hunter is both a big threat and also a land tutoring creature. So that's the deck in its current form. I found it to be quite better. I played a match against Grixis Affinity the other day, and the match was incredibly close. And I think I would have won the third game had I just not made some mistakes. I was pretty tired and making some blunders, and my combat maths was terrible. So yeah, I think we could have actually won that match had I just not played like a complete idiot. So anyway, as you can tell, I like this deck a lot. It's so weird, it's so janky, it's so strange. The playstyle is kind of so interesting. I find it very fun, and I find the deck is always surprising. The games often play out weirdly, when you're just hardcasting your threats because your opponent has blocked your combo. So instead you're just hardcasting Timberland Ancients and trying to smack face. I mean, it's a fun, weird deck, which I do encourage you to try. In the sideboard currently, I'm not really doing anything crazy. We're running Duress and Distress to basically proactively remove counter spells or graveyard hate. We're running Fairy Macabre against graveyard decks, and also as a way of stopping our opponents from getting a creature back when we exhume, because we just exile their creature with this. And then I'm also just running 2 more Avenging Hunters and 2 Horrors of the Broken Lands as just a few more threats. Sometimes if your opponent is a deck that's just not going to allow you to combo off, you can just side out your Demir House Guards or some of your combo pieces and just bring in more threats and just try to beat down. So there you have it. Here's the latest version of the deck, 6 land Spy Exhume. As usual, if you have suggestions for the deck, please let me know. I encourage you to try it and just let me know how it plays for you. If you have suggestions for cards or decks that I should build around in future, please let me know. If you enjoyed the video, please do consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.